Okay, we're getting close to done with our video series for this week. I want to talk in this video a little bit more in depth about information architecture. So information architecture is a design skill that's all about facilitating intuitive access to content in our experience, whether we're creating a website where the content is articles or portfolio items or tweets, or we're designing an exhibit for a museum where our content is dinosaurs and educational signs and interactive experiences like digging for dinosaurs in a pile of dirt. Regardless of what our content is, as designers, we need the skill of information architecture to organize it into a cohesive way so that our users can access it. So virtually in a website, that would mean they can find the pages that they need, they can find the content they're looking for, or in our museum example, they can find what they're looking for in the physical space and they can actually navigate from one section of the exhibit to the other easily and understand how they would do that and why they would do it. So organizing systems is the first thing we have to think about with information architecture. And then once we've organized our content, we have to, in the experience, visually show labels, navigation, and search. So to figure out how are we going to label the content if needed, how are we going to show the navigation and give people a way to get from one thing to the next, or search, how to search to get to one thing from the next. So if your information architecture is well designed, then your user should be able to answer, no matter where they are in your experience, where am I, what's here, is this useful and usable, where can I go from here, and can I find what I need? And what's interesting about the initial task of information architecture, which is organizing, is we can think about different ways of organizing. Richard Saul Wurman, who is a preeminent designer here in the US, who writes a ton, has published numerous books about information architecture. He's actually one of the founders of the TED series, the TED Talks, and he has written extensively about, he believes there's basically 5 ways to organize things: location, alphabet, time, category, and hierarchy. So let's look at some examples. On Facebook, it's primarily a time-based organization. When you open Facebook, the first thing you see is a feed that is organized by time with the newest at the top. If you want to tidy up your house, you've been watching Marie Kondo's Tidying Up recently, you have learned that there's category-based organization. So we can think about tidying up by thinking about categories: clothing, books, papers, kimono, sentimental items. So she's created this set of categories that is intended to help us achieve our goal of tidying up. And these could be other categories, right? They don't have to be these 5, but her premise is that these 5 are categories that are really easy for people to understand and really easy to implement as part of the task or the experience of tidying up. Organizing and labeling content is typically shown with a structure diagram or a sitemap. So once you figure out what the organization is going to be and you label the parts, you show it in a sitemap like this. Or if it were a physical space, you could imagine this not being hierarchical like this, but having a map of the physical space and showing the different pieces of content in the different parts of the physical space. So once you've figured out what that organization is going to be, then you have to figure out how to make that information architecture visible. So are you going to put tags on the content that people can see? Are you going to put up navigation systems? Like on a website, are you going to create a menu bar that shows the categories? In the Dinosphere, are you going to put up signs that label each section of the exhibit? And you might also create search systems. So maybe you give people a shortcut to that navigation where they can look for what they want with a search rather than browsing through the organization. So here's a good example of labeling, navigation, and search. Someone figured out that Craigslist is going to have these categories. They figured out what these categories are. Now they had to figure out how to show it to the user. So they're showing on this page the categories, and they're kind of communicating that the categories are mutually exclusive. So they're showing the categories one at a time. Each city has the same categories. So if you click one of these cities, this part in the middle will look the same. And the categories have subcategories. So they're displaying it on the screen. They're giving a way for you to see what all the different labels are for the categories. They're giving you navigation, a way to click on the categories, and then they're giving you a search over on the left, a way to search through the categories. Love this example from Amazon. Really good example of showing how to take that organization and bake it into the design, the UI, or the tangible part of your experience. At the top is Amazon with no user signed in. This is what you would see if you had never used Amazon before and you just went to the site. And the one at the bottom is what you see when you're signed in is me. And so you can see there was a lot of consideration on how people would use the categories. They gave people a way to browse the categories by putting this menu bar, this navigational system. Some categories are types and some are gifts, but they mixed them together in that navigation bar. They said, you know what, it's okay if they're not, the same kind of category. They gave a search so that users can search across all categories, and they even give you a drop down up here. So if you want to look in a specific category, you can do that. Some categories they give special emphasis to, like deal of the day. And then on the bottom, because I'm signed in, they have kind of this way of showing categories that they think I personally would be interested in, which I totally want that dinosaur toy. So they have me pegged exactly down there as a dinosaur lover. And so they're thinking about not just the way their site is organized, but how is it presented in the UI, and how can that presentation be personalized, and so that each person who is using the UI is getting a version of the organization that is relevant to them. So really interesting example there. So just to review, the most important thing when developing an information architecture is to figure out how something is organized. And then based on that, how are you going to show it in your experience? Are you going to create labels for things? Are you going to give people a way to navigate? Are you going to give people a way to search?